Now we're going to take you back to our top story. The Israeli military carrying out those targeted operations, it says, in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. Erin Agunke is here to tell us what the papers are saying on that, Erin.
Well, those targeted operations, Stuart, come as the humanitarian situation at that hospital complex worsens. Now, that's on the cover of The Guardian today. There, Palestinians dig mass graves at Gaza hospital, and then there's a big spread on it. That's because health workers in Gaza say that the Palestinians trapped there have been forced to dig mass graves precisely because there are no means of keeping the corpses from decomposing. Now, as some of the hospital's buildings have been bombed as well, patients, including, of course, babies that were on incubators, have been dying because of energy shortages and insufficient supplies. Now, given this dire situation, the pressure is growing on Israel. The UN warning that whether its claims about Hamas using that hospital complex to store weapons or fighters are true or not, it still does not absolve the Israeli military from its obligation to protect civilian lives. Now, speaking of civilians, for Le Monde, in today's edition of Le Monde, the fate of civilians is leading to growing pressure on the International Criminal Court as well, not only on Israel. But that's because since October the 7th, numerous complaints have been filed with the ICC against both the Israeli government, the Israeli army rather, and Hamas, both of which have been accused of various offenses in international law, war crimes, genocide, incitement to genocide, and crimes against humanity. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, as Le Monde tells us today, Karim Khan, insists that when enough evidence is obtained by the court to reach the threshold to obtain a conviction, he said he won't hesitate to act. But Le Monde does remind us of a rather important fact, which is that Israel is not signatory to the Rome Statute, which established the court, and that means that it has no legal obligation to cooperate with any investigations.
Our other big story today is Chinese leader Xi Jinping meeting with Joe Biden tomorrow for that mini summit in San Francisco. How's the American press covering that one?
Well, as you can imagine, the papers have quite a lot to say on this, Stuart. Bloomberg kind of sums it up today, saying that the meeting is one of low expectations, but high stakes. Biden, for his part, wants to avoid escalating tensions between the world's two largest economies. China is looking to lure back foreign investors amidst some economy struggles. Now, there could be a deal on getting China to crack down on fentanyl, Bloomberg tells us, but it says that there's no hope at all for any movement on the biggest sticking points between Washington and Beijing, and that is, of course, Taiwan and trade. Now, the Washington Post argues that Xi Jinping really wants to take advantage of Joe Biden, and that he's much less optimistic about the two's relationship than the U.S. president is. The paper says that his goal is to kind of lure Washington into a false sense of security while speeding up China's plans to dominate the region, to change the global order in order to benefit its own interests, and that no amount of open-ended engagement or dialogue coming from the Biden administration will change that at all. I'll finish with the New York Times, which in a just as kind of pessimistic take on this meeting says that the golden years in U.S.-China relations, when American policymakers were kind of cheering for China's economic success and worried about the risks that a failed China would pose to the world, are simply over. Instead, this editorialist argues, these days American policymakers are, to the contrary, looking for ways to frustrate China's ambitions over concerns about the risk that a successful and authoritarian China can pose to the world. It says that the limits and the possibilities of this kind of new this new way of this new relationship between China and the United States are still being defined, but we can only hope, I quote, that a few decades from now, people at the Council of Foreign Relations will be toasting to a new generation of leaders who finally got things right.
Let's change gears now. Damning revelations about Cyprus. This is Cyprus cozying up to Russian interests.
Yeah, a major report from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists indeed reveals that the Mediterranean island and, of course, EU member state has been courting Russian money and investment, so much so that it's earned the nickname of Moscow on the Mediterranean, Moscow on the Med. The island apparently ignores both Russian human rights abuses and Western sanctions in order to hide the massive wealth of allies of Russian President Vladimir Putin, and this even after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine and all of the consequences that now full-scale war have brought. This investigation says that the EU has failed as well to exert any kind of authority over its own member state, Cyprus, or to rein in its banking system, which is bloated by illegal money, not only from Russia, but it says other kind of unsavory figures abroad as well, including, for example, in Syria. Now, according to the Belgian paper Le Soir, which participated in this investigation, the Cypriot president has vowed to probe these alleged allegations of violations of sanctions against Russia in response, and he's insisted that, Cyprus's reputation and credibility are crucial.
Finally from Erin, Chinese researchers, they've created, apparently anyway, an alien-like species. Tell us more about this one, Erin.
Yeah, this is a very strange story, but I guess kind of exciting scientifically. It is a chimeric monkey, to be exact. And as you can see in these photos, it's kind of alien-like because it's got fluorescent fingertips and almost kind of fluorescent dark green but glowing eyes. Now, the monkey has, the term chimera refers to hybrid creatures that feature heavily in Greek mythology, but they're actually commonly used in biomedical research. This has been the case for the past several decades. And in this case, the monkey was created by essentially combining stem cells from two genetically distinct embryos. And it's the first time, the first live birth, rather, of a primate chimera created with stem cells. Now, though the ethics of this are rather questionable, Stuart, chimeric monkeys, as Le Monde tells us, are more biologically similar to humans than chimeric rats or mice. And so the hope is that they can be used to help study illnesses that affect humans by eventually building human organs and then testing on them in these chimeric monkeys. So it's kind of ET-like, but does apparently have scientific virtue.
Yeah, almost looks like nail varnish, doesn't it? Yeah, controversial, but there you go. It's incredible what science can do, isn't it? Erin Agunke with the papers on France 24.